I am so honored to have this opportunity to speak at Fusion. I feel like it's the Super Bowl of innovation for DoD, so it's really a privilege for me to be here. And I would say it's particularly notable for me because I've been invited to speak about additive manufacturing, which is a subject that I know next to nothing about. However, I do know a thing or two about what it takes to do new things in the Department of Defense. And I know a little bit about the people who do new things in the Department of Defense from my time standing up and running the Defense Innovation Board with Dr. Eric Schmidt. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is additive manufacturing in the context of this question of how do we embrace the new, the innovative, the disruptive? And that, I think, is an important question that we have to tackle if we're really going to get the full value of what AFWERX has to offer, not only the Air Force, but the whole department and the wider world of national security. Before I do that, I just want to emphasize I'm not speaking for Google, I'm not speaking for DoD, I'm just speaking from the heart about my experience tackling some of these challenging inertial forces that sometimes prevent us from adopting the new things that we've been hearing about in this great conversation about Base of the Future. So what I want to do is really tell you a story of one of these new things and one of the people that tried to bring something new into the Air Force. And he's listening, he's here, had a great time getting to know him and his team. His name is Senior Master Sergeant Robert Tingle. So he's a young airman, and he wanted to do something new. He wanted to create a 3D printed part to solve a problem that he found in his daily work with the Air Force. He is an aircraft electrician. He does battery maintenance for C-17s of the 446th Airlift Wing at JBLM in Seattle, a base I got to visit a couple of times. And his team is responsible for maintaining batteries that are in the C-17s that keep them in the air if anything goes wrong. And these are big boxes, almost like small pallets, if you will, cases that each contain dozens of batteries. Each of these batteries weighs a few pounds and costs $1,000. And like all batteries, they get hot and they swell. And so when they need to do maintenance on the batteries inside these larger cases, it's really difficult to remove them. And in fact, it's so difficult that airmen actually have gotten injured trying to wrench these things out of place. They've gotten burned with battery acid. They've gotten hit in the face with a battery. I mean, this is a problem, but he is enterprising, and he figured out a pretty simple and easier way to solve this problem. And so using CAD, he figured out a way to design a extraction tool that essentially solves this problem. Now, he was able to create a version of this battery extractor tool in just 2 weeks using aluminum and vinyl, and they milled it, they created it, they tested it out, it proves that it works. They had no problems with their batteries and no safety issues after that. And since these batteries cost $1,000, presumably this thing paid for itself in no time at all. They're saving between $100,000 and $200,000 just at their base. So anyway, Robert entered the Spark Tank competition earlier this year, and he actually won. So this is a great story about an airman seeing a problem, fixing it, creating his own version of what to do. And so now I'm pleased to tell you that he was able to take that file, email it to all of the other maintainers for C-17s and other airframes as well, and they've all been able to additively manufacture, 3D print this tool, and now everyone is able to use this. And I'm sure everyone who knows the Air Force knows that that is a fantasy story. That is not a real story. It was actually true up until the point that I said that he was able to 3D print that file. In reality, what happened is he won the Spark Tank competition, and there are no 3D printers in the Air Force. And there's nothing that he's able to do in order to figure out how to get that out to people. Excuse me. Sorry about that. It's like everyone's worst nightmare when they're giving a talk at home. So we got to the point where he was able to create this tool, but he's not able to share it. And the reason that he's not able to share it is because the Air Force has not embraced additive manufacturing. Even though he has all of the parts that you would think to make this a success story. We got to the very brink of the edge of really achieving this success, and then we just can't quite get over at the finish line. So let's review what we're talking about here for the broader question. We're not talking about a 3D printed aileron part. We're not talking about a safety critical system. We are not talking about something that is manufactured by a major industry where there is political opposition to the Air Force wanting to print their own parts. We are not talking about a situation where the chain of command has not supported Robert. In fact, he has a photograph of him with General Goldfein and a photograph with Will Roper, and his local commander loves him and loves the story. So he has the whole chain of command of the Air Force supporting him. And it's not that money is a barrier, because these things are really inexpensive and they save money. So this is the best possible case of when we might be able to adopt an additively manufactured tool. And yet we just can't get there. Why is that? Well, so, I talked to him about this, and it turns out that it's a color of money problem. That's almost a cliche. It doesn't really matter what the specifics are. If it weren't a color of money problem, it could have been some other kind of problem. But what we do know is that what we have here is this case of innovating but not adopting. And this really became one of the axiomatic principles that guided a lot of the thinking of the Defense Innovation Board. And they said that DoD does not have an innovation problem. It has an innovation adoption problem. And the proof that DoD doesn't have an innovation problem is Robert Tingle. The proof is AFWERX. The proof is fusion. DoD is actually great at innovation. We have a decades-long history of innovating. Where we are struggling more and more is adoption. And adoption is not a technological problem. It is an organizational and cultural problem. And what I want to expose and explore with you is what is the source and the cause of this, and what can we actually do about it? And we have to do this because the stakes are very high. The stakes are not high for the battery extraction tool, but the stakes are high because there are 1,000 Robert Tingles every year, and there are 1,000 battery extraction tools every year. And it's not this that the budget for those things adds up to things that be serious savings, but it's that our inability to adopt holds us back from realizing the true benefit of additive manufacturing. And the significance of additive manufacturing as one of many different potential technologies and emerging technologies we need to be producing is that it is the thing that connects the software revolution to the reality of the physics-based world in which the Air Force operates. And so if you're able to embrace data, cloud, software, AI, and all of these things in the virtual world, and you can marry it up with the ability to conduct additive manufacturing at scale, you can cross that chasm of the virtual world to the physical world, and you can reinvent the discipline of logistics. It's a whole new paradigm for logistics, which creates a solution to a time difference problem that has been one of the fundamental precepts of military strategy for 5,000 years. It's not that we believe we're going to be able to 3D print aircraft tomorrow, but it is the reality of the evolution of innovation, which is to say the metaphor of understanding that everything that we innovate is in fact the descendant of something else that we've created at some time in the past. It's the genealogy of innovation. And so in the same way that human beings were descended from organisms in a primordial soup, we know that the future of the ability to one day additively manufacture an aircraft will be the descendant of the original idea of being able to simply additively manufacture a battery extraction tool. And so if we can figure out how to accelerate the loop of experimentation and adoption today, then we know that one day a descendant of Robert Tingle in a future Air Force or Space Force will be able to figure out how to 3D print that part anywhere in the world. And one day we will be able to 3D print or additively manufacture safety critical systems. And one day we will be able to realize that vision of innovation that we all hold in our imaginations, and frankly, that hold in our hearts. And so being able to get over that barrier of adoption to accelerate introduction is what we need to be able to do to achieve the vision of innovation that gave rise to AFWERX in the first place. So what I want to leave you with are a couple of ideas about why I think that barrier to adoption is so hard to overcome. The first is this notion of technical debt, and the second is our attitude towards risk. We have a hardware-based view of how we acquire the stuff we need to do our mission. We need to adopt a software-based view. One of the things that most inspiring is hearing General Goldfein talk about the future of the Air Force as being a software company for delivering air power. That's an inspirational vision for me, and I think it is for those of you who are following along here to Fusion. And the way that we need to achieve that is by recognizing that our efforts to sustain all of our legacy systems and the rate at which they accumulate technical debt is going to sink our ability to adopt that fast iteration OODA loop, that high velocity experimentation that would lead us to be able to live in a world where the fantasy story of Robert Tingle's battery extraction tool turned out to be a true story, right? In that version of the world, we're able to get that idea in his mind to that CAD file, to that first prototype, to that first additively manufactured version, to the distributed additive manufactured version in a reasonable amount of time. And we cannot get there because we cannot build our software-defined future when we are spending most of our time and energy and manpower and resources sustaining the legacy of our hardware-defined past and present. So I gave a talk the title of Declaring Technical Bankruptcy, because I think it's time for us to declare bankruptcy on that past and figure out a way to turn the page and move on. So I mean that to be a bit iconoclastic, if you will. I'm not to be taken literally, but I'm trying to strike the right tone of appreciating how crucial and how urgent it is that we figure out a way to shed some of this burden and move past it and embrace the new. The second thing I wanted to talk about is risk. We calculate very carefully, very well, the risk of all the things that we do. But we are not, as an organization, very good at calculating the risk of what we omit, what we fail to do. And until we're able to figure out how to calculate the risk of not acting alongside the risk of acting, it's always going to be very difficult for commanders to figure out how to move forward. The reality is that our compliance-based system today is not really reducing risk at all. The amount of time that we spend into defining requirements to an excruciating detail, time not spent actually iterating, is holding us back. We are producing a system that is not actually reducing risk. It is manufacturing risk. We live in a risk production factory that is constantly producing risk. We just measure that risk the wrong way. We are looking at how we reduce the risk to those of us that build systems rather than the risk to those that use them. Every day that we spend unable to embrace new innovations and new technologies like additive manufacturing, like Robert's battery extractor, is increasing the risk to the warfighters, increasing the risk to the operators. In effect, it's increasing the risk to citizens. And so what we consider to be risk reduction is actually just risk multiplication. And so what I want to leave you with is this idea that if we figure out how to calculate the risk of not acting and ask ourselves not what would happen if I did this, but train our leaders to ask themselves, what will happen if I don't? What are the doors and the futures I'm foreclosing if I don't? Consider trying to find a way to embrace this possibility. Then that is the risk that I worry about the most. So I'll leave you with that. Congratulations to all the people participating in this amazing Fusion event. It's inspiring for me to be included. I hope these are a few provocative and interesting ideas that move the conversation forward. Good luck to all of you. Thank you.